The opinions expressed on Plastic Fantastic are intended for educational and informational purposes only and are not meant as a diagnosis, treatment, or substitute for professional medical advice. The mention of any product, treatment, or procedure on the show does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation and is purely for the information and education of the public.
Welcome to Plastic Fantastic, a weekly show dedicated to the latest in plastic surgery, aesthetics, beauty, and wellness. Now, here are your hosts, board-certified surgeons Dr. Robert Silich and Dr. Olivia Hutchinson.
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
Good morning.
And good morrow.
Did you say good evening?
I did.
All right. Welcome to Plastic Fantastic.
Is that the attention span we have today?
I couldn't tell. I was trying to make sure we get all the salutations in.
Oh, yes. Lots of salutations, starting with kind sir, Dr. Silich.
Kind, good lady. Welcome to Plastic Fantastic with Dr. Olivia Hutchinson.
And Dr. Robert Silich.
Happy 4th of July.
Happy Independence Day weekend.
Coming off Pride Month.
Going into another month of summer.
Exciting times.
Hot weather. Beach time.
Absolutely.
Fun things to do.
Yeah. Fun things to celebrate.
Don't forget the sunscreen. This is prime sunburn time, I think.
We do a skun. Did we do a sunscreen show?
I thought you were going to say the skunk.
No, did we do a sunscreen show yet?
What haven't we done? We've done everything.
73 shows and counting.
Yes.
Please tell me when we can stop.
Never.
I know.
It's like Sisyphus. As
So
soon as you
say.
think you're at the top, it starts all over again.
Is that like in one of the 7 levels of hell?
I don't think so.
No.
Too many
Remember
levels
all
of
those
hell.
crazy things that they tortured people with in Dante's Inferno? The guy whose liver keeps getting eaten by a bird. Guy who starves to death and has to eat his sons. All sorts of crazy Greek mythology.
It just makes you realize that the human mind has been perverse and perverted for centuries. Regardless of what we come up with now, somebody's probably thought of more horrible things beforehand.
It does take a pretty sick mind to come up with those things.
But we're not going to veer off onto sickness and horror. We're going to talk about Independence Day and how proud we are to be Americans.
Proud and pride. Because
Yes.
it was Pride Month. We missed our Pride show.
Because we only have so many minutes in our podcast that we can discuss things. And, every month should be Pride Month. It shouldn't just be 1 month a year where you make a special salute to people who are gay and bisexual and LGBTQA plus.
What's the A? Alternative?
Alternative, asexual.
Oh, asexual.
Ambiguous. Lots of A's. They had a run in the park on Saturday.
And it was hot. I saw those poor people coming back. I was on my bike. That was wicked. They were dying.
Also for Pride. And it was relatively early. So they all had little pink, well, not all, but most of them had these pink T-shirts that celebrated.
Little tank tops, yeah.
Do you know how far that was? Definitely farther than I could run.
I think it was a 5K.
Do you participate in those? The Roadrunners Club.
I did for a very brief period of time. I'm not anymore. It was the worst thing I ever did. I'm telling you the truth. I ran almost 7 days a week from the ages of like 30 to 50. Boy, was that a mistake.
Why?
It wrecked me. Might have kept my lungs healthy, I'll bet you. But I'll tell you, man, it wrecked my knees, my legs, my ankles. It was tough.
It's interesting because I read an article that discussed the best exercise for men, activities in terms of keeping fit and healthy.
Does it involve a remote control? Please tell me it does.
Lift it over your head and hold it there until your arms start shaking.
Absolutely.
You can probably add some weight to the remote control. You know how they have those little wraparound things for your wrists and ankles?
That sounds good.
You can just add the little weights to the remote and then do weights. We can be so creative. I think if COVID has taught us anything, it's that you can be creative with making the most of
that is true.
Tight spaces.
Yeah, I live in a tight space.
So what did you do? Did you run a marathon inside your apartment?
No, but our gym in our building was closed and all gyms were closed. So I had to go get a big yoga mat. I did that. There's a lot of YouTube videos that you could watch about it. So.
About you specifically?
No. About working out at home and
Silich
stuff.
goes to get a yoga mat.
It's kind of annoying.
Well, before we had all these very fancy equipment, machines and workout regimens and stations at the gym and all these fancy schmancy things, people used to just stay fit by lifting logs, right? And
running away from saber-toothed tigers.
Throwing the javelin, all these interesting things.
Being chased by a dinosaur.
I was just thinking about the fact that they're doing Olympic trials and stuff. I didn't realize that
right now?
skateboarding is apparently an Olympic sport. I don't really understand how they decide what's an Olympic sport and what's not.
It's a joke. Give me a break. Come on. Really?
There are the X Games, right, which is sort of the alternative to the Olympics.
I'm a big surfing enthusiast, and I don't even think surfing should be an Olympic sport.
Well, is it? Have they added it?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. There's certain sports that are being suggested, and whoever scrutinizes the pros and cons, and there must be a committee of some kind, I guess, who decides what would make sense and the venue, and then you need judges, all of these less than fully objective, shall we say, sports that require some kind of biased judge. I mean, you have to be
curling?
biased whenever. No, curling? I think that's just points, right? You don't get judged on form. It's the aesthetic stuff, right? It's like when
I'm
you
sorry.
go...
I thought you meant the bias in selecting different sports to go into the Olympics.
I meant
you
like
mean,
the judges who are actually adjudicating and giving marks.
That's tricky. I mean, that always comes up
like
in figure skating, gymnastics, right.
And some other ones, I'm sure, where you get graded on form.
Right.
The ski jumping, do they do that too? I think that maybe when you do aerials and those types of things, right? I think
freestyle.
The freestyle. And that may be X Games. I'm getting all my winter sports mixed up. That's going to be down the road. That's what we do. We just talk about anything that comes to mind.
You could email us about anything that comes to mind at plasticfantasticshow@gmail.com.
You're listening to Dr. Robert Silich
and Dr. Olivia Hutchinson
on Plastic Fantastic. We're going to come back to Independence Day. How great it is to be in a country that, 1, has an Independence Day, 2, is independent, and 3, where its citizens and even people who are not citizens, just people who reside here, are allowed to express their opinions. We're not going to get super political, but we do have a Supreme Court, which is supposed to be completely apolitical.
Right. Although the interpretation of it is very political.
Right. Well, because it's still human beings who interpret what the Constitution said and the various amendments and freedom of religion. I mean, things that we really take for granted. I think it would be good to sort of revisit that every once in a while.
On this show?
Take a look. The freedom to undergo plastic surgery at will. Choose wisely.
What was that thing you were just reading to me before the show about some bill in South Carolina?
Oh, yes. It had to do with legislation that was passed that allowed medical providers. We're going to tie this in between the Pride Month and LGBTQ and freedom of choice. So apparently they've now decided, or they've passed legislation that says that medical providers can object to performing surgeries or providing treatment if it does not go along with their, or if it violates their moral or religious convictions. So I think this comes up quite a bit in various situations. Most recently, though, they were talking about transgender or gender affirming surgery. So, they're concerned that if a physician states or feels that those types of procedures are counter to their moral or ethical beliefs, they will refuse care. And that's obviously something that could be potentially problematic. So
I know I'm putting you on the spot, but was it in terms of a transgender person that had some kind of illness that you don't have to take care of them? Or
no,
was it more
I think it's
for
more,
a plastic surgeon to do those surgeries?
So I think that's why it came up in terms of surgeons who would not provide care, whether it's surgery or whether it's hormone treatment, I guess would be another one. Again, we're not going to get into the whole question of abortion, but now that's come up not just in terms of performing those procedures, but also the medical treatment, right? The pills that you can take that are medically induced abortions or terminations of pregnancy, and whether or not those are also going to be banned or whether there's going to be a constitutional issue brought up. So all of these things are sort of tied up in the court systems now, but it's the states really who have been given a lot more independence, I guess, to make those decisions and make those types of legislations. And so a lot of them have passed now.
As physicians, it's almost irrelevant because you can decide whether or not you're going to do sex or gender reassignment or gender affirming surgery or not. You can, as a physician, decide whether or not you're going to do termination of pregnancies or not. What you can't do is you can't deny anybody of any kind of background, orientation, sex, creed, gender, whatever, care if they're sick. I mean, how many times were we in that situation when we were doing general surgery and trauma where you would come in and literally the bad guy in one bed and the police officer in the other, and you're working on all of them equally the same.
Next to each other.
It's never, well, we'll go slow and we'll do the cop first. And you never do that. I mean, and that's just...
you don't ask them for things when they come in.
Medicine is blind, and especially for sick patients and stuff.
And of course, there's the oath that we take.
Of course.
When we finish medical school, that goes to that as well.
Yeah, for everybody across the board. It doesn't matter. You can't judge. I mean, it gets into eugenics and all sorts of very strange unethical things if you start to pick and choose. That's still one of the beautiful things about being a doctor, is that it is blind and you can just kind of render care to everyone. You don't have to think about that.
Yeah, so we are physicians first and surgeons second. I mean, we talked about this before in terms of choosing appropriate candidates for surgery when it's elective surgery. And by the same token, you can discuss who would benefit from certain procedures. And obviously, you and I do almost entirely aesthetic procedures. So that's a very different type of patient population because you do have the luxury of time and being able to assess patients and then send them for additional studies or evaluations or working with other medical doctors and providers if there are hormonal issues at stake or if there's psychiatric problems or if you're concerned about that. So before we operate on patients, they all have to get medical clearance where their internist will clear them for surgery. So that's a completely different type of process prior to surgery.
Yeah, it's a nice thing to do what we do because we really try and optimize everything. Unpredictable nature of medicine, some people prefer and some people would not like what we do. They like that ER physicians, trauma surgeons, they kind of like that it could change at every second, and it's the unknown quality of it that gets them excited and interested in something. For us, it's kind of the opposite. I mean, we like it.
We're not excited.
No, we're excited, but I think we love the chance of having had that background to now so-called optimize cases, optimize patients, procedures and stuff, try and maximize the output.
And it also helps you, obviously, in dealing with all the unforeseen things that might come up in the operating room. When you've been in those types of very high-octane, acute, critical types of situations where you have to think on your feet and make those very rapid-fire decisions, that sort of prepares you for taking on anything else that might come up. So I think that's where the training comes in. So important in this day and age, as you know, considering all the non-surgeons who claim to be plastic surgeons.
Oh my God.
There never seems to be an end.
We always veer back to that, right? Because it's just, we're bombarded by it every day. It's incredible.
And we're not even bombarded by it as much as the lay population is, because, you know, we're sort of insulated to some extent in our ivory tower of
and that was
professionalism.
Why the whole point of this is to
debunk,
there you go,
demystify, and educate.
And educate. Very good.
So we're going to keep away from all the nonsense and misinformation that's out there and hopefully provide you with some interesting information. And also, you know, one of the things that is so important to remember is that not only do we as physicians have time to choose patients and determine which patients are best suited for the types of procedures that we're going to be performing for them, patients also are independent and have the ability to choose their plastic surgeon. Maybe not so much, obviously, in emergency types of situations. So we still have this fantastic healthcare system that provides care to everyone, regardless of ability to pay is one thing. EMTALA, show up in the emergency room and you're going to be treated.
Yeah, explain to the listener what that is.
Yeah, so basically legislation that ensures that anyone who comes to the emergency room will be provided care. And so nobody gets turned away.
Regardless of whether or not you have insurance.
Regardless of whether or not you're an American citizen.
Or even
since
a citizen.
We're talking
That's
about
right.
Independence
Anyone.
Day and citizenship and what does it mean to be an American? You know,
in a weird way, it's our form of universal health care. I mean,
right.
This is a huge topic, but in emergency situations, there is universal health care. No one is denied, ever.
And so, you know, the cost aspect of it is something completely different, and that we're going to leave to the boring economists to sort out. We, on the other hand, are going to be happy to respond to any emails that you might want to send us. If you'd like to send us an email, please do so at plasticfantasticshow@gmail.com. You're listening to Dr. Robert Silich.
Dr. Olivia Hutchinson.
On Plastic Fantastic. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
You like fireworks? We're American!
Hot dogs, fireworks, and beer.
We need fireworks for our 4th of July celebration.
To me, it's about fireworks. Fireworks, fireworks, fireworks.
Happy July 4th.
America.
They come to America.
This is Plastic Fantastic with Dr. Robert Silich and Dr. Olivia Hutchinson.
Exposed to hazardous materials while serving in the military and have an illness or condition as a result.
If so, you may be eligible for VA benefits and services. Whether you need health care or want to file a disability compensation claim related to military exposures, VA is here to help. Visit va.gov/military-exposures to learn more and apply today.
You served your country. Now let VA serve you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Miller, a dentist and a volunteer for Dental Lifeline Network. I learned about DLN shortly after graduating dental school. I wanted to help people who are not able to access the oral health care they need. As a new dentist, I wondered, do I have the skills to provide the care they need? And do I have the time when trying to build a new practice? Even now, after 10 years, I can tell other dentists, yes, you can, and this is a no-brainer. Dental Lifeline Network is a nonprofit that has helped me literally change the lives of people in my community through the Donated Dental Services program. DLN asks dentists to volunteer to see just one of the many patients in need each year. If you're a dentist or know a dentist, please share this important information. It's easy. DLN screens those in need and coordinates the initial appointment. Patients are treated right in your office on your schedule. If you're like me and want to make a real difference in someone's life, DLN makes it possible.
Go to willyouseeone.org to learn more. That's willyouseeone.org.
The premier choice for plastic surgery at its finest. This is Plastic Fantastic with Dr. Robert Silich and Dr. Olivia Hutchinson.
God bless America.
America.
The taste of freedom.
Greatest country on the planet.
The 4th of July.
Happy birthday, America.
Oh, but ain't that America.
So what did you do for the Pride weekend? Did you get caught up in any of that stuff? It was really busy in New York.
It was very busy. I steered clear of going downtown, did some shopping, because why not? It was still very busy.
What kind of shopping?
Even clothes shopping.
Clothing? Where'd you go?
Shoes.
Uptown? Nice.
Where didn't I go?
Did you go with
more like it.
With your kids or just you?
I went with a couple of them, yeah.
Just pick two.
So many options.
Many of them. You do. You have options.
If we can, we'll get away on the weekends. But I like to start things early because, as you know, well, that's something that we're used to doing from the get-go. And when you're a surgeon, you sort of get into the habit of being the early bird. The early bird gets the worm.
That's right.
So I actually like to be that first person in the stores, not at 6 a.m. because I don't think anything really opens at 6. When is it? Just around Thanksgiving, I think, right? When they have these crazy hours. Some of the stores
not
open
all the
at
stores,
midnight
but yeah,
or
like some of the big
right?
ones. That's right, for all those crazy sales.
Macy's. Well, Sears. I just said Sears. That's dating ourselves.
Is Sears gone?
Yes.
Completely gone?
Pretty much, I think.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I think it's
an American institution.
One of the many. Yeah.
You watch Stranger Things, by the way?
I don't, although you're one of the very many people.
So late to the game, but let me just tell you.
So am I.
From our generation, what made me think of it was Sears because it's basically a period piece. It takes place in the early mid-'80s, and a lot of it takes place in the mall. And they have replicated
in the mall
because it kind of centers about a bunch of teenagers, preteen kids.
Is there a
they're always hanging out in the
in?
mall. Yeah, some nondescript town in Indiana. And they've replicated all of those old stores like Sears and the early Gap, Sam Goody, remember that? The music store.
Radio Shack?
Radio Shack. It's really, really funny.
That's hysterical.
And when you mentioned Sears, it made me think of that. But anyway, that's what I'm kind of watching these days. It's pretty good. So anyway, back to Pride weekend. Big, big weekend in New York. Lots of celebrations everywhere. Lots of traffic.
And just think about it, too. I mean, there are plenty of countries that support their gay population and allow people to live their lives regardless of sexual orientation. But then there are all these countries where they don't even recognize the fact that homosexuality is a
and if they do recognize it, they can imprison you and in some cases kill you.
Yeah.
There's capital punishment
Public,
in some countries. Yeah.
You know, flagellation or things that seem so barbaric.
Yeah.
And I guess not to cast aspersions on other countries, but completely different system. So I think we're lucky to have independence in
we're
so
lucky,
many
and
ways.
We're lucky you can protest whichever way you feel about the recent Supreme Court rulings.
Yes.
You can protest in either direction without having to worry. You can celebrate Pride. You can celebrate all sorts of things. And that is something people, I think, take for granted in America. It's a wonderful thing.
You know, it is summertime, and it's going to be a very, very busy travel season, apparently. I don't know if you've been looking at the numbers and the predictions. This Independence Day holiday is supposed to be the most busy in terms of people driving places because despite the fact that gas is, at $15 a gallon or whatever.
I would think it'd be just the opposite.
Even flights are overbooked.
I have a question for you, Smarty Pants, and the listener. Is the gas on the plane the same gas that we use?
Why are you asking me these questions? You think
Well, I'll tell you why. Because I was watching this interview with these people over the weekend on the news.
No,
and
it's
like,
jet fuel. Jet fuel is different.
Right. That's what I thought. They're all like, I'm not driving.
Are you going to ask me why?
I'm flying because it's cheaper. I don't want to spend all that money to drive. And then I thought, are airplane tickets up and flights canceled and all that because the airline companies are struggling because of the price of fuel?
Wow.
And it's a different fuel than what we use in our cars. But is it somehow related?
Well, I think it's related. But one of the bigger issues, however, is the fact that they don't have crews. They don't have pilots. They have limits on how many, just like we do, just to remind our listeners that doctors can't work continuously, especially in residency when your hours are really significantly worse than they are at any other point. You can't just work day and night for 5 days straight. So
Right.
there are limits on the number of hours. And similarly with any kind of highly focused activity, except maybe the military, I'm not sure there are any
Right.
types of hours that are limited for the soldiers. But for airline pilots and also the crew members, they can only work whatever number of hours in a row. So if there are delays, which there seem to be more of, also because we don't have quite as many people employed by the airlines, as far as I understand it, then you can exceed the time limit that they have imposed for either the pilots or the crew members, and then you don't have crew. So, you can't fly the plane. So it just sort of compounds to the whole issue. It's a number of things that have come into play. But there was a funny article actually in the Wall Street Journal that talked about how nobody has any time to do anything. Everybody wants to make plans, but everybody's sort of overbooked. And so there's no time left to do anything. So
Life is what happens when you're making other plans.
Exactly. So it was kind of cute.
John Lennon, by the way.
That's a Lennon quote?
He used it in one of his songs.
Oh. I wonder where he got it from.
I never knew if it was him or it was just one of those colloquial sayings.
Yeah,
Life
you'd have to go.
Life is what happens when you plan for it, or
right.
Life is what happens when you're busy making other
plans. If you look
plans.
at the etymology of words or sayings, or when was the first time something was used, it's interesting because you can't always get beyond. I mean, if you Google it, certainly
Shakespeare always comes up.
Right.
I give it to him every time. Who said that? Well,
the originator.
Clearly.
Or you go back to, the Greek philosophers or things of that nature. But it makes you wonder, well, maybe somebody said it before it was recorded. Maybe in the hieroglyphs.
Right.
The cuneiform hieroglyphics.
Very nice.
So.
Good word.
If you're listening Plastic Fantastic,
Dr. Cuneiform Hutchinson.
I am not a nail. And Dr. Robert Silich.
You can email us at plasticfantasticshow@gmail.com. And we are found on most major podcasting platforms such as
iTunes,
Spreaker,
YouTube.
Nice. iHeartRadio, I think. Anyway,
wherever you can look for
you
it.
could find us. We're out there. When we're not being banned or sanctioned for using rock and roll we shouldn't use, but whatever. We try every time.
No, we try to do the right thing. We try to abide by.
That's what I mean. We try and abide, but somehow we always get busted.
Not always, just on occasion. Remember when they had the Ollie North hearings and his lawyer said, "I'm not a potted plant"?
Oh, I thought Ollie said that. The attorney said it?
The attorney said it because the judge said something.
Haven't seen him lately. I think he's a big radio.
Who, Ollie North or the attorney?
Oliver North.
Yeah,
I think he's a big talk radio guy.
He had a show, I think, on TV where he would talk about military things or the CIA or something.
But not anymore.
There's so many new shows that we can watch on all these different platforms. So between Prime Video, Netflix, what are all these companies that create their own content, right? HBO has their own stuff.
Netflix.
I've lost track. I said
Prime,
Netflix.
Yeah.
Just make their own shows and then you can only watch them
like
if you
us.
have a subscription.
Making our own show. But you don't need a subscription. It's free.
Us, yeah.
It's free. You can listen to us.
And the other thing that's free is that you can send us an email.
Yep.
plasticfantasticshow@gmail.com. You can ask us anything about Independence Day. So many things that we don't know the answer to.
Preferably cooking. You notice how we haven't said anything today about cooking. We're both looking at each other like, okay, who's going to break the ice?
It's coming. Break the ice.
It's got to come.
Now we got to talk
nice.
about
Cocktails.
Yes.
Good idea. All right, let's do cocktails in the third segment. I think that's a great idea.
Yes, cocktails and food. How did we manage to avoid talking about that?
Well, because we started the show being like, okay, let's try and rein it in. We haven't talked about plastic surgery either, by the way.
We should talk about it because it's summertime. There are some seasonal variations. I was going to say diurnal. There really aren't diurnal.
Diurnal. God, you come up with these great words. Cuneiform, diurnal. Amazing.
Variations. You're listening to
really
the ever-changing
syntax,
diction and syntax. But one of the things that we usually notice is that there's a little bit of a slowdown during the summer because patients don't really want to undergo plastic surgery. They go away. We were talking about travel. People escape.
Yeah, they want to enjoy themselves.
They want to run away. We do have a certain number of patients who come into the city from abroad. They're always tourists. Last year, I think, was the most bizarre in terms of the fact that there really wasn't this seasonal variation where the summertime was much lighter. I think it was almost the same in terms of patient interest in booking surgeries and that kind of thing. But now as things have normalized a little bit, I think we're starting to see that a little bit more again, where a lot of patients, especially around New York City, although I like New York during the summer.
I do too.
Because relatively empty. It's still fun.
I mean, Times Square is never empty. The Empire State Building is never empty, but
it's emptier.
It's emptier, and in some of the sleepier neighborhoods in New York, it's much more quiet.
You can get a reservation at some of your favorite restaurants.
You can walk the streets and it's quiet. You can drive. It's
and
beautiful.
I know we're not going to talk about food because we're not on our third segment yet, but don't we have Restaurant Week coming up again?
It's always Restaurant Week. Haven't you noticed? It literally used to be a week. Now it's like there's one a month. Come on.
And it says extended through. But one of the things that is going to happen relatively soon, they're supposed to dismantle some of the outdoor dining that we have.
I hated it when it happened. I hate it now.
There's something about eating on a sidewalk that when it's not... Listen, there's some restaurants that have done a really fantastic job.
There have, but they're usually the really, really high-end ones.
There are a lot of them that are disgusting.
You know, New York...
Vermin.
The outdoor restaurant scene began right when street cleaning was suspended.
Which is actually a real problem.
Sanitation was curtailed, obviously because of COVID, all of that stuff.
Right.
And all those things happened at the same time, so it's filthy. You know, they've been very lax on the codes. There have been a ton of accidents with these sheds. There's been lots of car accidents with them.
Surprisingly, not as many as I would have expected.
You would have thought it would have been a disaster.
Yes.
But biking accidents, because
I think that's
the poor wait staff have to cross the bike lane to get to the sheds usually. That's a nightmare.
And those guys don't slow down. Or the other ones are even worse in a way, are those scooters, motorized vehicles
which were illegal,
that they have.
And then our previous mayor, de Blasio, made them legal.
Whose name shall live in infamy.
Oh my God. I think it was in 2017
where
or
is
2018.
He, by the way? Do we know where he's...
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that for all those supporters of Wild Bill de Blasio.
Having lived through all of his terms. Oh my goodness, yes.
No, I heard he's running for Congress.
Is he really? He's staying in politics? Okay.
Yeah.
We just haven't heard much about him.
Which is good.
Our new esteemed mayor, who should probably be paying some attention to what's going on.
Who was surprised.
At the condition.
He was surprised at the condition of New York. So has he been the mayor for a year yet?
I actually think it's hysterical that he used those words.
When was he sworn in? In January?
2020.
Now, right?
No.
Hasn't been a year. I don't think it's been
Who
a year.
can keep track of anything?
All right, well, whatever it is, it's pretty late in the game. He's been mayor for a while. I think it's been a half a year. And he recently was surprised at
the condition
of New York. It's like, dude, where do you live?
Clearly not here. Or if
he
lives here,
let's
he doesn't
be serious. You and I aren't exactly like,
politically correct.
We're not, but we're not living in the slums either. We've got like reasonable jobs. We're doctors. We live in nice neighborhoods and we see it and we think it's horrible. And we're pretty privileged. I don't mind saying.
Well, a lot of the younger kids who live in the city, and by younger, I mean, kids in their 20s, not teenagers who are still living at home. But there are tons of these first job out of college kind of generation of young adults who live here, and they're willing to put up with some things, but there's a lot of stuff that they find completely intolerable too. So it's not just a generational thing. I think it's across the board. Anybody in their right mind would not accept that as a normal status quo. We're going to take a short break. You're listening to Plastic Fantastic with Dr. Robert Silich.
And Dr. Olivia Hutchinson. We'll be right back.
Plastic Fantastic with Dr. Robert Silich and Dr. Olivia Hutchinson is coming right back.
Green, green, green. It's your home, it's your dream. Radon testing, keep it healthy and clean. Make it green, green, green.
Making it green is making sure the air in your home is healthy for your family to breathe. Make sure you test your home for the presence of radon. It's easy. To learn more, call 866-730-GREEN. Preserve your family's health and well-being. Get your home tested. Now that's living healthy and green.
Green, green, green. It's your home, it's your dream. Radon testing, keep it healthy and clean. Make it green, green, green.
To learn more, call 866-730-GREEN.
A message from the US EPA.
Roxanne Watson is on a mission.
Hello, how are you doing today?
She wants more people to register as organ, eye, and tissue donors.
Are you an organ donor?
Yes, I am.
Yay.
My goal is to sign up the most people in the United States.
What drives her? Roxanne's own life was saved through the gift of a heart transplant, made possible by an organ donor.
I decided that day that I was going to devote myself to the cause of organ donation and signing people up and honoring my donor by doing that.
Now she's back to health, and she's a powerful force helping to save lives every day through her work. Imagine what you can make possible by leaving behind the gift of life.
8 people can be helped with the major organs, and up to 50 people can be helped with a little bit of everything. And when you think about it that way, that you could help that many people, it's amazing. It really is.
Learn more and sign up as an organ, eye, and tissue donor. Go to organdonor.gov. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Health Resources and Services Administration.
Plastic Fantastic.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union.
I have a dream. A dream that one day.
We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights.
That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
We haven't talked about food yet, but we're going to break the ice.
Skirting the...
Skirt staking it.
Yeah.
We're going to break the ice now and talk about... Skirt steak is good,
yes,
right?
On the grill.
You almost
so
can't
easy.
mess it up.
I know.
Wait, do you make
Hanger steak too?
Isn't that the same thing?
No, it's a little different, believe it or not.
Tell me the difference.
I don't know. It
So
tastes
how do
a
you know
little
it's the
different.
same? How do you know it's not the same thing?
Because one is on the under hanger steak and the other one is under skirt steak when you go to the butcher.
I think it's the same thing. It's like there's a
Cuts
very
little
fine
different.
line between a Kansas City strip and a New York strip.
Well, you'll have to educate us on that.
There you go.
Demystify and debunk.
There you go. We were going to break the ice and talk about cocktails.
Well, first we're going to talk about how we're going to fix New York City.
Seriously?
Yes.
All right. What's the first thing? Got to clean it up. It's filthy.
Exactly.
Come on.
Got to clean up the physical aspects.
God, it's filthy.
You got to clean up the dirt and the garbage on the streets. And then you got to address the people who are not being taken care of, who are wandering the streets and are homeless.
So it
way
was,
too many of that.
It was the first, actually, all of the Giuliani administrations in New York and Bloomberg who had this concept of quality of life crimes. And what they talked about was instead of trying to tackle the big giant thing from the top, start with all the other little things. Remember the squeegee man?
What's the big giant thing?
Well, in other words, increase more police for crime, or let's,
How about like the subway?
Well, no, all that stuff is good, but
Public
what they started with was, okay,
the squeegee man.
The squeegee man, right. Give a ticket
and
for
girl,
that.
I guess, if there was
Give
one.
a ticket for spitting. Give a ticket for graffiti. Broken window crimes, they called them. And you start with those quality of life crimes, and then that changes everything. Clean up the streets, exactly. Make it look clean. Give somebody a summons for littering. All those little tiny
There should
things.
be a carrot and a stick, though. I
mean, it shouldn't be like Singapore.
No, right? I was going to say, if you're chewing gum and you spit it out, how many
You go to
lashes
prison.
do you get for
Yeah,
that?
it's horrible.
10 years
But something,
incarceration.
right. So we should clean up New York. Okay, cocktails.
Okay. Now that we've agreed on that, yes. So you have to make sure that people are not repeat offenders. There has to be some kind of address.
My God, you're really going after this.
Okay,
It's like
we're
a civic lecture.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, now I'm done.
No,
That's
do it.
enough. I'd much rather talk about cocktails.
No, I'm.
Do you like ice in
educate
your
me.
cocktails, or do you like them just to be strained?
I like it cold, and I got to tell you the truth. After the
Some
first
like
sip,
it cold.
Exactly. After the first sip, it's just not cold enough.
That was a great movie.
Unless you down
Some
it.
like it hot.
Some like it hot and some sweat when the heat is on.
Marilyn Monroe.
Yes.
Big favorite
And Jack
of mine.
Lemmon, I think, was in that.
Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon. I think you
There
might
were
be
two
right.
of them. Yes. Anyway.
There's three of them actually. Marilyn, Jack, and Tony.
No, I mean the two guys. Yeah, weren't there two guys? And
Yeah.
yeah. So some like it cold, and it's never cold enough.
I agree with you. I prefer a martini, nice and cold and straight up. But after that first or second sip, I just worry that it's not going to be cold
Especially
enough.
if you're outdoors in the heat.
Who eats outdoors and drinks outdoors in the heat except you?
Well, there's the boathouse, which is very
Yeah,
pretty.
with all the condensation dripping on your glass. Your hair is frizzing. You're sweating.
That's the real issue.
You're
It's the
uncomfortable.
hair.
Oh, sounds great. Where do I sign up?
Well, they have shady spots, those terraces that have umbrellas, parasols.
You're not selling me on that.
I went to the St. Bart's one for the first time.
By
That
the
was very
church?
pleasant.
How
Yes.
is that?
That was actually a lot of fun.
I see it all the
It was a
time.
beautiful day. First of all, there was no humidity.
Well, that's key.
And it was not particularly hot. And I'm trying to remember, when did they convert that space? Because that used to not be anything.
I think it was a while ago.
It was a while ago. But it's very nice because you're over on Park Avenue and 51st Street, I think.
And it's in not the courtyard or the, what would you call it? It's kind of the front
It's
of
a
the
terrace.
church. It's
Yeah.
a big terrace
The
on the
front yard.
church. It's beautiful.
Now, we stayed outside, but it's
What kind
not...
of church is that?
Episcopal. But the nice thing is that it's receded back from the sidewalk. It's also elevated. You're not at street level. You're not getting the trucks that are driving
I see
by.
how it goes here. It's not very Christian of them, is it?
It's haute.
I
You
gotcha.
can write to the diocese, the
So,
archdiocese.
do they have booze there?
They do have booze as well. I mean, this was lunchtime, so.
And is it related to the church, or did the church just rent out that spot?
Well, I don't know the details, but I don't know if it's like a tithe.
Seriously, that's what I mean. Like, does the church basically get a profit from, the
You know what they
happy
should
hour?
have had? They should have had all the drinks named after saints. So like
That would have
St.
been
Augustine.
hilarious. My God. I don't know
St.
saints.
George.
I don't know saints well enough.
Saint
Episcopalians
Sebastian.
have saints?
Sure. St. Paul.
Oh, that's right. St. Bart. There you go. What it's named after.
The martini.
I thought that was just a Catholic thing. The St. Bart's Martini.
Yeah, we're not going to go down the religion route, though, because that is probably even more politically incorrect than politics. And
Really?
We've already dabbled in that. Freedom of religion, another one of those guaranteed rights.
Freedom of choice. I
Constitutional.
said it last week, Devo.
Freedom of everything. And then the protection, not just the written freedom, but also knowing that the laws in the courts will be there. And for the most part, I mean, nothing works 100% of the time. And, everything can be fixed a little bit here and there. But I think for the most part, we are very lucky. So cocktails. I think around July 4th, they usually do like the They do.
Thought we'd never get there.
The red, white, and blue. Some very interesting themes that come up with cocktails now, I've noticed. They're really incorporating some interesting liqueurs that I personally have never heard of. There was one that was like a maraschino one, like a cherry one, which obviously would be red, but it's like a very dark red one.
What was the booze?
Luxor or something with L. Sounds like Luxor. Not Luxembourg, but close. And that was a maraschino one. But also just multiple different elements. And so just interesting, not just your typical, martini.
Isn't Kier a cherry liqueur?
Kier Royal. Or is it
Or
blackcurrant, maybe?
Is it really?
I think it's cassis.
Look at you.
But
I
don't
wouldn't
know.
mess with you when it comes to cocktails. I'm just going to say, yeah, she's right.
I'm going to have to brush up on my liqueurs. And besides the big alcoholic classes that everybody knows, or that a lot of people know, whiskeys. I still don't know the difference between like bourbon. Maker's Mark is what? Bourbon. Okay. Scotch, whiskey, like different things like that. I just like the taste. I'm much more about the taste and no labels. We're going to move away from labels.
Bourbon is much sweeter than whiskey, but basically the concept is the same.
Old-fashioned. Right? Every once in a while, there'll be like these ridiculous, like we were talking about the Louis XIII, which was the cognac, which is...
Yeah, we still said we were going to buy one and keep it here.
You can't find it now.
Is
That's
that
the
right?
other thing that's happened with supply chain is that I think there was just, maybe not with alcohol, because I think alcohol sales in general went up. And of all the groups, the ones that have been noted to have the highest increase in alcohol consumption is women.
Really?
Yes. Women had a much higher increase in their intake, or at least the beverage
During
consumption.
COVID.
During COVID. Maybe that's gone down some, but I just thought it was funny. They were looking at how much alcohol consumption has increased.
I wonder if it's because, I can't even think of why that would be. I'm trying to come up with reasons why that would be.
Maybe because they didn't mind admitting to it. Maybe it's another one of those things where people might be in denial. But I do think it's nice also that we're sort of, it feels like we're coming out of COVID. I know there are a lot of people who are still kind of concerned about the new strains that are going to be popping up.
Seems like we've had a lot of it here in New York lately.
Well, everybody's getting sick. The hospitalizations haven't gone up, and the deaths, thankfully, also haven't gone up.
Yeah, it's become like a miserable summer cold.
Yeah. So people are out for like a couple of days. And we were talking about travel earlier, so now they don't require testing. For all those listeners.
I'll bet you that's going to change again.
Well, for those listeners who listen to us in order to get their travel information, the U.S. has done away with mandatory testing for people who are coming into the country. And I think that's also controversial. There's always going to be some kind of controversy.
There's a lot of reasons why people listen to us: travel, cocktails, food.
Have you discovered something new?
The least of which I think is plastic surgery.
As far as...
What I have discovered about travel is try and get on the first flight of the day.
And hopefully the plane's already there, because that's the only time that you can get stuck.
It's like when you operate, right? What do they say? Try and be the first case of the day. Because if you follow somebody or,
Well, because it's the unpredictability of what's going to happen. So generally speaking, we don't have the crystal ball. Maybe some of us have a crystal ball.
But think about it. It's very similar to like when you fly, like if we go to the hospital, right? Yep. After a certain hour, there's no nurses.
The only time,
there's no crew.
Yeah.
There's no room. There's no hangar. There's no gate. Everybody's sitting around waiting.
There's no gas.
On the tarmac, waiting in the pre-op area.
Have you ever been on a flight in the summertime? This happens especially. Tarmac has gotten too hot because of the planes that have been lining up for hours on end. They literally overheat and then they have to go back to the gate.
Nice.
So just when you're like, we're number 2 in line, it's like, no, actually, we can't take off because we've been waiting
now we're too hot.
For too many hours and it's 110 degrees. And of course, the tarmac is black, so it attracts even more heat. So I can only imagine what happens to the physics.
Can't
we're
wait
not
to
gonna
go. Can't wait
down
to go
that
flying
route.
again.
Well, you weren't what's London going to be your next trip again? That's your... They
I don't
probably
know.
have some
It was
interesting
so
cocktails
nice.
over there.
They do. They're very into it. Like, they're really into it. And the bars there. Lately in New York, about 3 or 4 of the really fancy bars in London have had pop-ups here in New York.
Yes,
the
I missed that
Carlisle
one.
had one. The Dead Rabbit had one downtown.
Really? Have you been down to the Dead Rabbit?
No, but our office, as you know, our staff have gone many times. They love it.
Well, it's historic.
Have you gone?
Right? No, not yet.
Yeah.
I might do that this summer.
We should go. Want to go now?
Sure.
How much more time do we have in this
We
thing?
have another minute.
Perfect. Pack it up. Let's go. I'm in.
In celebration of
Why
Independence
not?
Day. And
Well,
that's
it's
been
what,
around
11 a.m.? Let's do
hold
it.
on a second. We don't drink before noon.
Isn't it funny? If you have a Bloody Mary, it kind of counts. I'll just put some tomato juice in.
Yeah,
It's okay that
that's
it's 9 a.m.
Hair of the dog, right?
Totally.
But isn't the Dead Rabbit Irish, I think?
I think it has something to do with the gangs in New York in the turn of the century, or even before that, actually.
But weren't the gangs not American gangs? Weren't they from immigrants who came from, I think it's Ireland, but I might be wrong.
I think it was Ireland. I think it was England. I think there was some native, so-called native, which would like be the Mayflower people, the first Americans
the
that
original
came.
Puritan types.
That's a good movie, by the way.
Which one, the Mayflower?
Gangs of New York.
Oh, yes.
And a good book. I know.
Both.
You read the book, I'm sure. Whatever. I did see the movie.
I have not, but
You're very smart.
there are lots of other books that are on my reading list. That's what we should do.
Summer reading list?
Summer reading list.
Great idea. I'll do my movie
movies.
list. Great.
Yes,
you can do the
exactly.
summer reading list.
And as a shout out to...
Or I'll cast every book that you're talking about.
There we go.
I could do that.
Even better. Okay.
That's a good idea.
And I think there are people who actually get paid to do that. So if you're ever done with practicing plastic surgery...
I think that would be a really fun job to be a casting agent.
Yes.
I love that.
You can sort of decide what you'd like to do. If you have any emails that you'd like to send
us
about
do it quickly because I'm thirsty and I'm going to go to the bar with Olivia Hutchinson. Plastic Fantastic Show at gmail.com. You're listening to Plastic Fantastic with Dr. Olivia Hutchinson.
And Dr. Robert Silich.
We'll be back here next week. We love you. Happy Pride. Happy Independence Day.
Happy 4th of July.
Keep the motor running. I'm thirsty. Let's go.